Hi there.
Go on.
Very nice. I'm Suella. Can I ask you what your message is to Israel?
I know that I've been talking a lot about Palestine, but listen, y'all, none of you who are watching right now should ever shut up about Palestine, especially right now. We all definitely do need to be doing our part to be aware and to do anything that we can within our power to speak truth to power and to stop the United States from funding Israel on their ethnic cleansing campaign against Palestine. Yes, at some point I am going to go back to making chiller content, as I always do. So for anyone who is in the comments saying, oh, why is Skylar hyper-focusing on this? One, I'm autistic. I hyper-focus like all the damn time. And two, because this is important. Speaking of important, I have some important good news for you, and that is the United Nations General Assembly voted to give Palestine more rights under the United Nations. And of course, right on cue, the United States and Israel voted no. Now, to be clear, let's just make sure that we're not mincing words here. This does not grant Palestine full membership, which they should obviously do at this point. Palestine absolutely deserves to be a member of the United Nations, as well as the fact that Israel is already a member of the United Nations. The very country that Israel is imperializing on should be a fucking member of the United Nations. But here's the thing, it depends on the Security Council as to whether or not Palestine will be a member of the United Nations. What the fuck? Now I just want to say real quick before I, get comments about this, and that is because of how I'm just a one-person recording and editing studio, my house, and because of how time flies so quickly and how things in the political world does move by really fast, I'm only just warning you that if this video comes out and something happens in terms of Palestine and the Security Council and them getting UN membership, I'm working as fast as I can. Anyway, the reason why we're talking about this today is because after this vote happened, the fucking ambassador of Israel to the United Nations went up on stage and threw the biggest temper tantrum in the world. This is the same guy who said that the UN was Hamas.
Many UNRWA workers in Gaza are themselves members of Hamas. The time has come to bust the myth of UN-supplied fact.
We spent a lot of time lampooning on him when he did that, and we're about to lampoon on this doofus again. He is so funny. We gotta punch up every once in a while. We're really trying really hard to hold accountable here. This is our favorite boy. Hold on, what's his name again? He had a name, I forgot what it was. UN Israel Ambassador. What's his name? His name is Gilad Erdan.
Colleagues, today another travesty is being committed here by the General Assembly, an unforgivable act. The destruction of the United Nations Charter. The UN Charter, the sacred document which serves as the foundation of everything we are supposed to do here, is being trampled upon. It is being thrown out the window. You are spitting on the very values that were formulated to bind this organization. With today's destructive resolution, you are circumventing the Security Council, ignoring its decision, and violating the norms this organization has abided by.
Yes, what he's referring to is a set list of principles that the UN, as well as the members of the UN, appeal to when it comes to making policy changes and who they introduce. And the broader goal here is obviously to make the world better.
The Charter was drafted for a reason, but most of you care nothing for the qualifications it outlines. So let me remind you what the Charter says about admitting new UN membership.
Okay, let's see what he has to say. He's gonna make an argument that Palestine does not deserve to have any kind of rights, which, by the way, he's talking about membership here. Palestine's not a member of the UN yet. He's bitching about something that hasn't happened yet.
Membership in the United Nations is open to all other peace-loving states which accept the obligations contained in the present charter, peace-loving. Number two, the admission of any such state to membership in the United Nations will be affected by a decision of the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. With today's vote, you are not only bypassing the Security Council in violation of the Charter, but you are bastardizing the meaning of peace-loving.
I'm sorry, what about peace-loving? This is the Knesset. It's basically a legislative branch in Israel's governing body. One of the members of the legislative branch is Golan. Think if J.K. Rowling and Giorgio Maloney did polymerization and came out with this person. That is Golan.
הממשלה הזו לא מגמגמת לגביך. אתה יכול להמשיך לחלום שנסיים את הלחימה ללא ניצחון. אנחנו לא מתביישים לומר שאנחנו רוצים לראות את חיילי צה"ל הגיבורים והקדושים שלנו תופסים את סינואר והמחבלים שלו באוזניים וגוררים אותם בכל הרצועה בדרך למרתפי שב"ס, אבל שב"ס של בן גביר, לא של ברלב או מיכאלי, או במקרה הכי טוב לארון קבורה כזה או אחר. אני אישית גאה בהריסות של עזה, ושכל תינוק, גם עוד 80 שנה מהיום, יספר לנכדיו מה עשו היהודים שרצחו להם משפחות, אנסו אותם וחטפו להם אזרחים.
Membership in the United Nations is open to all other peace-loving states.
This is Israel Katz. Yes, his name is the name of the nation state that he serves. He's a member of the Knesset, a part of the national liberal movement that is in Israel. His parents are Holocaust survivors. Please keep this in mind when we go over his following statements. On October 12, 2023, he said, humanitarian aid to Gaza, no electrical switch will be turned on, no water hydrant will be opened, and no fuel truck will enter until the Israeli abductees are returned home. Humanitarian for humanitarian, and no one will preach us morals. While it's undeniable that Hamas has definitely committed war crimes, we discussed in a previous video how Israel's been committing war crimes for far longer than Hamas even existed. Actually, we've done fucking several, and numerous podcast episodes about it too, holy shit. Even acknowledging all of that, this tweet relies on you not knowing the whole history of Israel and Palestine before October 7th. Israel Katz is attempting something called manufactured consent. It's very similar to how the media shaped the public response of 9/11. They rely on you not knowing the history of the Mujahideen guerrillas, the Afghan war with the Soviet Union, the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh that led to the Shah being an economic ally to the United States while ruling Iran with an iron fucking fist until the Iranian Revolution in the 1970s, where Ayatollah Khomeini was the only opposition that has not been destroyed by the Shah, leading to the very reactionary part of fundamentalist radical Islamism. General media analysis of 9/11, because of that, requires you to not know that. So the response to 9/11 then looks justified. And if you're easily manipulated by the media or far-right fascist groups, this kind of nationalistic response to fuel the war machine looks justified to you. Which is why you should check out today's sponsor, Ground News. Yes, I'm a sellout. Look, no matter what, Ben Bichickian is right. The media is dwindling into a monopoly, which means that the media definitely wants to influence your opinion that holistically benefits the corporations and the state apparatus.
It's a fair question.
I don't want to pile in and look, absolutely, crack on as far as I'm concerned. But she did ask you a direct question there. I think our viewers would like to know: Do you think Israel has a right to exist?
I think that's a silly question, to be honest. And I think you're asking the wrong questions. You're asking those questions to distract from the central point that I was making, which is that the reason you don't like these student protesters and you don't like these encampments, one is because they've already brought you down, but two, it's because of what it represents, which is a growing movement and a growing feeling in this country.
But hey, Ground News is here to help. because when we're looking through the media, we don't know automatically what kind of double speak that they are engaging with, because after all, the media is inherently manipulative. But hey, check this out. Ground News has a lot of cool features that you might not already be aware about. Like, hey, wasn't Al Jazeera very recently banned from Israel? Well, look at that. Al Jazeera is left-leaning, and we all know that Israel is a far-right nation state. Hey, how much of a leaning is the general coverage of transgender issues? We can look here that it is pretty split. We can see the left-wing coverage has to do with policies, while right-wing coverage has to do with outrage, mainly clickbait. You can also see blind spots in people's reporting. You can see which side of the political spectrum is focusing the most on certain key issues, definitely giving you a broader perspective of what both sides of the discourse are saying on these key issues. And once again, sensationalization versus policy. Yeah, you can use my code check.ground.news/turboqueer and you can get 15% off any subscription plan, and I would go check those prices because they're pretty good. With that said, thank you so much Ground News for sponsoring today's video, and now back to the video. Oh yeah, we were talking about Israel Cat. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, "This is collective punishment and a violation of international law. We cannot starve nearly 1 million children to death over the horrific actions of Hamas, whose disregard for Israeli, Palestinian, and human life overall could not be more clearer. We must draw a line." What she just did was call out that it was collective punishment, rightfully so, but then followed it up by giving them a bone and criticizing Hamas. And she's not wrong for this, but it's like she's now giving them more ammo to dismiss her very point that she just made about collective punishment. Because Israel Katz went on to say, "Indeed, Madame Congresswoman, we have to draw a line. We will not tolerate murdering children and burning families. The line has been crossed. We will fight the terrorist organization Hamas and destroy it. All the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. We will win. They will not receive a single drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world." And this man's parents are Holocaust survivors.
But you are
bastardizing. Y'all have at this point have killed over 30,000 people, including children. What part of that makes your country peace-loving?
You know that the Palestinians are the exact opposite of peace-loving. You know this.
I don't know what the absolute shit you were talking about.
Since they rejected the UN partition plan in 1947.
I don't know what the absolute shit you were talking about.
They rejected it.
I don't know what the absolute shit you were talking about. Not to mention, it doesn't justify anything you are saying.
They have only tried to destroy Israel time and again. They are terror-loving, not peace-loving. They are anything but peace-loving.
I don't know what the absolute shit you were talking about. Yeah, I am just repeating that bit because this is circular logic. Everything that you are saying here requires literal circular logic in order to buy into it. It's like trying to deny the Holodomor or the Holocaust or the Armenian genocide. It's like trying to defend a genocide. And by his absolute bitching, moaning, and complaining for his nationalistic fantasies to wipe out Gaza, he is trying to justify it, and he's failing to do so. And what's more is that while he's making an ass of himself on stage, using the rhetorical prop that is Hamas to generalize all the Palestinians, he is now setting a precedent for the same kinds of charges to be levied against Israel. It's a double standard, like the double standards that I've also identified with Mike Palak in my previous video going over the topic. Y'all should go check that out after this one.
When I did go there were lots of posters about Israel, there were posters about Palestine, and there were placards about Gaza. So we can't completely ignore the issue about what's happening in Israel and
Gaza. Let's talk about it seriously. Let's talk about what the Israeli state has done for the last 76 years.
So would you say that Israel has a right to defend itself.
Israel does not have the right to do what it is doing right now, which is a genocide.
Another really crucial thing that I want to talk about is the International Court of Justice and their application for arrest warrants for the leaders of both Hamas and Israel. Even if we acknowledge the fact that Israel is very much committing a genocide on Palestine, it is true that the militant group Hamas has committed war crimes. And this is interesting because this particular prosecutor was handpicked by Israel and the United States. I'm only mentioning this because I don't want people thinking that this is the Nuremberg trials, but that this is going to be a step in the right direction for prosecuting world leaders. Yeah, reformist politics don't really amount to much in the grand scheme of things, but in my opinion, any accountability is better than no accountability. But the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is because Benjamin Netanyahu showed up on CNN to give a response to this arrest warrant application. Throughout this interview, there have been many moments where Benjamin Netanyahu flat out denies statistics provided by both the United Nations and several human rights groups about how Israel is committing an ethnic cleansing campaign in Palestine, particularly in Gaza, and the violence that's been occurring in the West Bank at the hands of settlers.
It's a central part of the ICC's charges against you and Golan is, quote, starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. Now, I know that Israel repeatedly claims that enough aid is getting in and there is not purposeful starvation, and those claiming otherwise are misinformed are lying. Is Israel going to send a delegation to The Hague to present any evidence to defend itself?
I think these charges are exactly as President Biden called them. They're outrageous.
Let me be clear. Contrary to allegations against Israel made by the International Court of Justice, what's happening is not genocide. We reject that.
The first false symmetry is he equates the democratically elected leaders of Israel with the terrorist tyrants of Hamas. That's like saying that, well, I'm issuing, arrest warrants for FDR and Churchill, but also for Hitler.
Whoa! Everybody, we gotta stop everything that we are doing, because what Benjamin Netanyahu just said is arguably the dumbest thing I've ever heard him say. Alright, let's break it down. Adolf Hitler is... Do I even need to give this guy an introduction? 6 million Jews were killed, Night of the Long Knives, the book burnings of Magnum Hirschfield's work, the segregation of Jews put into ghettos, the objectification of women and little girls for their nationalist ideal of the Aryan race, Nazi Germany's invasion and bombardment of several countries, including but not limited to England, France, Poland. Should I even mention the Warsaw Pact? Should I even mention the American Nazi Bund? Yeah, Adolf Hitler doesn't need an introduction, but somebody who does is Winston Churchill, as well as Franklin D. Roosevelt. Because the United States and the United Kingdom helped prop up the Israeli nation-state and help sustain it, Benjamin Netanyahu is attempting to use two very famous political figures in both countries' history. This is a charm-effective public relations tactic. But let's take a look at both of these individuals and what they think about Nazis and Jews. In the book Churchill and Hitler, Essays on the Political Military Direction of Total War, in 1935 he would describe how after the war the Nazi dictator had fought, quote, his long, weary battle for the German heart. The story of that struggle cannot be read without admiration for the courage, the perseverance, and the vital force which enabled him to overcome all the resistance which barred his path. Now, to be fair, the London Blitzkrieg has not happened at this point yet, the Holocaust hasn't happened yet, but Hitler already gained political power, and Jews were already being persecuted, on top of the fact that Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, his anti-Semitic hate speech book, 10 years before Winston Churchill even said this. So what struggle is he even talking about? Well, according to the International Churchill Society, Churchill had always urged Jews to be good citizens while retaining their faith and culture. His advice to his Manchester Jewish constituents in 1907 was, quote, be good Jews. He explained that he did not believe a Jew could be a good Englishman unless he is a good Jew. That's a very condescending way of talking to Jewish constituents, but I digress because there's more. The same article elaborates by saying keeping the Jewish movement free of communism was another consistent theme. The prominence of the individual Jews in senior positions in the communist revolution of Russia, Bavaria, and Hungary had alarmed Churchill since the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Writing about this in the 1920s, he urged the Jews to abandon communism and either enter into the national life of their own countries, as in Britain, while adhering faithfully to their own religion, or opt for Zionism. Yeah, that sounds like an ultimatum. It sounds like there are conditions for Winston Churchill's support of his Jewish contemporaries. Either assimilate to the British lifestyle version of Judaism or be a Zionist. And guess what, folks? There's more. Churchill has regarded Zionism as a very great ideal, writing in 1920, quote, "If it may well happen, there should be created in our own lifetime by the banks of the Jordan a Jewish state under the protection of the British Crown, which might compromise 3 or 4 millions of Jews. An event would have occurred in the history of the world which would, from every point of view, be beneficial." This is a Christian Zionist perspective. Winston Churchill wants there to be a Jewish state so that the Jews in the United Kingdom can go away. And if that does sound anti-Semitic, that's because it is. The whole premise of the existence of this state is founded on anti-Semitic principles. It was supported on anti-Semitic principles. But okay, let's take a look at Franklin D. Roosevelt. There's a very good article written by the Smithsonian about how the United States government turned away thousands of Jewish refugees fearing that they were Nazi spies. World War II prompted the largest displacement of human beings the world has ever seen, although today's refugee crisis is starting to approach its unprecedented scale. But even with millions of European Jews displaced from their homes, the United States has a poor track record of offering asylum. Most notoriously, in June of 1939, the German ocean liner St. Louis and its 937 passengers, almost all Jewish, were turned away from the port of Miami, forcing the ship to return to Europe. More than a quarter died in the Holocaust. Government officials, from the State Department to the FBI to President Franklin Roosevelt himself, argued that refugees pose a serious threat to national security. These two men are the men whom he is using as a political prop to justify his own genocide.
Or I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, George W. Bush, but also for bin Laden. That's absurd.
Oh my god, he said something even stupider. Look, okay, I don't want to recap what I just said earlier in the video about how the United States kind of landed itself into the war on terror, but we need to remember that everything that we learned from the war on terror on the United States side was the result of generations of U.S. involvement and U.S. intervention in several forms of democracies and destabilizing them in the process. Like, say what you want about Al-Qaeda, of course. Say what you want about ISIS, of course. Say what you want about Iran, of course. But each of these instances has occurred because of U.S. involvement. And if anything, just like how Colin Powell lied about weapons of mass destruction, you are lying about a genocide. A genocide, Benjamin Netanyahu, which you are committing.
We should note, though, it's not just the ICC expressing concerns about the lack of humanitarian aid getting into Gaza. President Biden and his administration and their officials, not to mention European allies of Israel and their officials, they've all been making this case for months that Israel is not letting enough aid in. So when President Biden expresses concern about you not letting enough aid in, is he wrong?
Well, no, we had the same concerns. We were trying to get the aid in. We got the aid in, and Hamas was looting the aid. That's what was happening.
You're a fucking asshole. Do you really think that we forgot about the flour massacre? Do you think Hamas did the flour massacre? People were trampling to get food, and the IDF shot them. And what the fuck do you mean you were trying to get aid into Gaza? First of all, you didn't build that pier, the United States did, and it was rather performative. Secondly, the IDF has been blocking aid from getting in. And thirdly, staff members of humanitarian aid organizations have been killed in the hands of the IDF. So what the fuck are you talking about, Benjamin Netanyahu?
Let me ask you, because what Hamas did on October 7th, just to make this clear, what Hamas did is abhorrent, as is the refusal to return the hostages. Oh, abhorrent.
The assertion that Hamas refused to give up hostages is wildly false. In fact, Hamas collaborated with the CIA to come to a ceasefire deal that would involve releasing the hostages, a deal which Israel refused and then invaded Rafah.
But whether or not it was Israel's intent, tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians, including countless children, have been killed and maimed by the IDF in your war against Hamas. Is there anything you and the IDF could have done any differently to avoid all the loss of innocent lives in Gaza?
First of all, every civilian casualty is a tragedy. Every child lost, or every woman lost, or every innocent person lost is a tragedy. But for Hamas, it's a strategy. So while we go out of our way to get them out of harm's way, Hamas goes out of its way to keep them in harm's way, shooting at them if they try to leave the battle zones, but many have left, thankfully I can say that.
Benjamin Netanyahu must really think that the audience of CNN is fucking stupid. Gaza is so densely packed, where do you think everyone in Gaza is supposed to go? Even if Hamas went to some isolated cave that was rural as fuck, keeping in mind that this is all in an apartheid district that your fucking nation state has created, that is ironically the size of Detroit fucking Michigan, it still does not explain the actual buildings that the IDF has fucking decimated in the name of so-called quote-unquote killing Hamas. And let me tell you a little something, disregarding the fact that the IDF has actually killed its own hostages that it's trying to rescue, but if Israel's mission statement in this war is to rescue the hostages and you're claiming that Hamas is hiding within the civilians, then by this exact careless tactic, you are going to kill the hostages in which you were claiming you plan to protect. You are failing, keeping up the illusion.
Whatever the numbers are, it's too many.
In the meantime, the lie circles. Well, look, yes, one is too many, but the reason they're there, the reason we have civilian casualties at all, is because Hamas is preventing them from leaving. I'm happy to say that in the Rafah operation that we've conducted, 1 million people actually left. People said, well, there are 1 million people, 1.2 million in Gaza. Where are they going to go? They're going to be trapped. Well, 1,950,000 have already left, and there are very few civilian casualties because we're doing everything to get them out. This is our policy. It's humanitarian, it's responsible, we comport with the laws of war, and we're the ones taken to the dock. And it doesn't give any solace that they're also taking these killers of Hamas, these murderers, and putting them in the dock. As I said, yeah, Hitler's in the dock, but so is FDR, and so is Eisenhower.
Eisenhower, huh? Yeah, I'm gonna lambaste on the Prime Minister of Israel by citing a pro-Israeli news site. Even his own media is smarter than he is. In September of that year, the War Refugee Board ran into a similar problem, this time with Eisenhower. The board drafted a leaflet which it wanted US planes to drop over Europe, warning civilians to refrain from collaborating in Nazi atrocities against Jews. The board wanted the warning to bear General Eisenhower's name because, as Paley put it, quote, we felt that such an action might have some effect since Eisenhower presumably will be in charge of certain parts of Germany when occupied. Eisenhower, however, insisted that the leaflet's references to Jews be deleted. The final version urged readers not to, quote, molest, harm, or persecute, end quote, any of the, quote, great many men, end quote, being held by the German authorities, quote, no matter what their their religion or nationality may be. Eisenhower's deletion of the Jews was consistent with the overall attitude of President Roosevelt and his administration regarding the plight of Europe's Jews during the Holocaust. They were concerned that too much emphasis on the persecution of the Jews would increase pressure for actions to help them, such as admitting more Jewish refugees into the United States, something the president strongly opposed. That is why Roosevelt's 1944 statement commemorating the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Revolt, a rebellion staged by Jewish fighters, did not mention Jews. In the same spirit, the chief of the U.S. Office of War Information instructed their staff that their writing concerning the Nazi mass murders would be, quote, confused and misleading if it appeared to be simply affecting the Jewish people. Now, of course, the Jewish people were not the only people who were dramatically affected by the Holocaust, but this is a very milquetoast and rather disrespectful way to handle an entire diaspora of people who need to be saved. And maybe, just maybe, Benjamin Netanyahu thinks this is all okay because he's taking note from the very guy who erased any mention of Jews when pleading to the European population to not side with the Nazis. Yeah, what a fucking clown.
The entire world to remember this moment, to remember this immoral act. So today, I will hold up a mirror for you.
Oh, a mirror, huh? Let's see it, baby. Let's see it.
This is your mirror.
Yup, there it is.
So that you can see exactly what you are inflicting upon the UN Charter with this destructive vote.
Do it, do it, do it, do it, yeah!
You are shredding the UN Charter.
No, you are. Look at you, dude. Oh my god. Cope, bitch. What a fucking loser. What a real fucking loser. Like, to the max, too. What a loser.
You're a loser! Are you feeling sorry for yourself? Well, you should be, because you are dirt!
Man, that was fun. I love laughing at the most powerful people in the world, especially those tyrannical fucking losers who are trying to govern over people in which they have no legitimacy to govern over. Not only has Israel killed so many people in Palestine, they've also killed so many people of their own hostages. And not only that, they don't even have their own politics in line with the hostages' families at this point, who are protesting in Israel to this very day. There is something I want to talk about before we end this video, and that is, while making this video, I came to a stunning realization that the Holocaust and the Nakba happened in the same decade, actually. Like, I know that's just a fact, but you think about the Holocaust as like a before time, especially if you're like me, who is a millennial, born in like the early 1990s. The Holocaust at this point is like 15 years away from being 100 years old. But in the sheer scale of time, the Nakba is not that far behind. And while anti-Semitism is on the rise and the effects of the Holocaust are still very much felt today, there still very much is an apartheid state in Palestine. As I've made these videos on my channel about this very topic, I've made very quick work to always mention that Judaism is not a monolithic religion, that Jews don't always line up with the nation state of Israel. And I believe that this distinction is crucially important because in order to tackle the tenets of Zionism, you have to look at it through a settler colonial lens.
In Israel, every small child knows all the weapons, all the soldiers, tanks, all military vehicles. This is safeness. This is the most dangerous place for the Jewish people. 7th of October didn't start on 7th of October. It started in 1948 on the 15th of May. It started by the Nakba for the Palestinians. This happened when they want to cover up their killings, the genocide, with more killings. When you control a people, a large amount of people, of 2 million people, when to have electricity, when not, when to have water, and when not. This is the outcome. Zionism is basically built up on mistrust in God. Don't believe in God. Don't trust God. From the other side, Judaism is built up on trusting in God. The state of Israel is a rebellion against God, and they will not succeed.
I think it's very easy for some people to look at the Nakba and the apartheid state that Israel is committing and simply resorting to saying, why don't you Jews stop doing a genocide? But you have to understand that as a theocracy, Israel is at odds with the Jewish faith. Throughout this video, we've lampooned on quite a lot of people who either weaponize the Jewish identity, as well as weaponizing American and British historical figures, as well as weaponizing the Holocaust and the persecution that Jews have faced for centuries. There is simply no reasoning with a Zionist. This is why Christians support them more than Jews do. It doesn't matter how you twist it, because at the end of the day, all of this bullshit that we have just talked about for the past 8 months or so is all resting on the principles of settler colonialism, not Judaism. I think what really stood out to me while making this video was that Benjamin Netanyahu was lying through his teeth about giving humanitarian aid to Gaza, while Katz was literally saying that he's gonna cut off all the power and water and any aid, even going as far as to say humanitarian for humanitarian, like he doesn't already have his finger on the pulse of Palestine's very ability to survive. This is collective punishment. It's also a wild contradiction. With Katz having Holocaust survivors as parents, oh my god, that's fucking disgraceful that he would even dare say that at all, let alone publicly. Because I think when we look back on the Holocaust, what we can learn from it is not how we can advance on these very horrific tragedies, but how we can learn to not do it again, how we can find warning signs, what we can do differently to combat this from happening again. And I'm just appalled that Katz, Benjamin Netanyahu, Gilad Erdan, Yoav Golan, and May Golan all still enthusiastically endorse the idea of killing and depriving people of their basic necessities, their basic sense of autonomy.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
Well, no, we had the same concerns. We were trying to get the aid in. We got the aid in, and Hamas was looting.
So then, by your logic, does that make the idea of Katz, Yoav Golan, and yourself members of Hamas?
Many UNRWA workers in Gaza are themselves members of Hamas.
Israel as a nation state will remain in infamy as a pariah state for the rest of history. What a laughingstock, a perpetual clown that continues to be funny for the rest of time. Anyway, I'm Skylar Sabo. Please be sure to rate, comment, subscribe. Tell me your favorite part in the comments below. Peace out.
One more really important point, just, it's a yes or no really before we... Does Israel have a right to exist?
This is the wrong question that you're asking.
Well, OK. I think that's quite tough.
And should the hostages be released?
Listen, why is this conflict happening in the first place? Who is responsible for it?
It's easy to say yes to that.
Who is the responsible for it?
Do you believe women were raped on October the 7th by Hamas?
I believe there is a lot of violence taking place across that whole region, and I think Western imperialists are the first people who set up that problem in the first place, and they're continuing to back everything that Netanyahu
refusing
is doing.
to condemn Hamas.
And you refuse to condemn the whole system that produced all of that violence in the first place.
And I want